Gentlemen, happy is the citizen while under the protection of the army of his command has convoked national sovereignty to exercise its absolute will. I, therefore, count myself among those most favored by divine providence, since I have had the honor to gather the representatives of the people of Venezuela in this august Congress, the source of legitimate authority, depository of sovereign will and the arbiter of the destiny of the nation. In transferring to the representatives of the people the supreme power with which I have been entrusted, I fulfill the wishes of my own heart, those of my fellow citizens and those of our future generations which expect everything from your wisdom, uprightness and prudence. In discharging this sweet duty, I free myself from the overburdening of immense authority and the unlimited responsibility weighing upon my weak shoulders. Only a compelling necessity coupled with the commanding will of the people could have made me assume the tremendous and dangerous charge of Dictator Supreme Chief of the Republic. But I can breathe easier now in handing back to you that authority, which I have succeeded in maintaining with so much risk, difficulty and hardships amid the most awful tribulations that could ever afflict any social political body. The epoch in the life of the Republic over which I have presided has not been a mere political storm. It has been neither a bloody war, nor yet one of popular anarchy. It has been indeed the development of all disorganizing elements. It has been the flooding of an infernal torrent which has overwhelmed the land of Venezuela. A man, such a man, as I am, what check could he offer to the march of such devastation? In the midst of the sea of woes I have simply been a mere plaything of the revolutionary storm, which tossed me about like a frail straw. I could do neither good nor harm. Irresistible forces leave directed the trend of our events. To attribute this to me would not be fair, it would be assuming an importance which I do not merit. Do you desire to know who are the authors of past events and the present order of things? Consult then the annals of Spain, of America, of Venezuela, examine the laws of the Indies, the rule of the old executives, the influence of religion and of foreign domination, observe the first acts of the Republican government, the ferocity of our enemies and our national temperament. Do not ask me, what are the effects of such mishaps, ever to be lamented. I can scarcely be accounted for, but as a mere instrument of the great forces which have been at work in Venezuela. However, my life, my conduct, all my acts, both public and private, are subject to censure by the people. Representatives, you are to judge them. I submit the history of my tenure of office to your impartial decision. I shall not add one thing more to excuse it. I have already said all that could be my apology. If I deserve your approval, I have attained the sublime title of a good citizen, to me preferable to that of liberator, given me by Venezuela, that of pacificator, which Cundinamarca accorded me, and all the titles that the whole world could bestow upon me. Legislators, I deposit in your hands the supreme command of Venezuela. Yours is now the august duty of devoting yourselves to achieving the happiness of the Republic. You hold in your hands the scales of our destinies, the measure of our glory. Your hands will seal the decrees ensuring our liberty. At this moment the Supreme Chief of the Republic is nothing but a plain citizen, and such he wishes to remain until death. I will serve, however, in the career of a soldier, while there are enemies in Venezuela. The country has a multitude of most worthy sons capable of guiding her talents, virtues, experience, and all that is required to direct free men, are the patrimony of man, of those who are representing the people here, and outside of the sovereign Rudy. There are citizens, who at all times have shown their courage in facing danger, prudence in avoiding it, and the art, in short, to govern themselves and of governing others. These illustrious men undoubtedly merit the vote of Congress, and they will be entrusted with the government that I have just resigned so cordially and sincerely and forever. The continuation of authority in the same person has frequently proved the undoing of democratic governments. Repeated elections are essential to the system of popular government, because there is nothing so dangerous as to suffer power to be vested for a long time in one citizen. The people become accustomed to obeying him, and he becomes accustomed to commanding, hence the origin of usurpation and tyranny. A proper zeal is the guarantee of republican liberty, and our citizens must very justly fear that the same magistrate who has governed them for a long time may continue to rule them forever. And, now that by this act of adherence to the liberty of Venezuela, I can aspire to the glory of being counted among her most faithful lovers, permit me, sirs, to state with the frankness of a true republican, my respectful opinion regarding the scope of this project of a constitution, which I take the liberty to submit, as a token of the sincerity and candor of my sentiments. As this is a question involving the welfare of all, I venture to believe that I have the right to be heard by the representatives of the people. Well, I know that in your wisdom you have no need of counsel. I am also aware that my project may perhaps appear to you erroneous and impracticable. But, sirs, receive with benevolence this work, which is a tribute of my sincere submission to Congress rather than the outcome of a presumptuous levity. in the other hand, your functions being the creation of a body politic, and, one might say, the creation of an entire community surrounded by all the difficulties offered by a situation and the most peculiar and difficult one and the voice of a citizen may perhaps point out a hidden or unknown danger. By casting a glance over the past, we shall see what is the basic element of the Republic of Venezuela. America, in becoming separated from the Spanish monarchy, found itself like the Roman Empire, when that enormous mass fell to pieces in the midst of the ancient world. Each dismembered portion formed then an independent nation in accordance with its situation or its interests, the difference being that those members established anew their former associations. We do not even preserve the vestiges of what once we were. We are not Europeans, we are not Indians, but an intermediate species between the Aborigines and the Spaniards and Americans by birth and Europeans in right. We are placed in the dilemma of disputing with the natives our titles of possession and maintaining ourselves in the country where we were born, against the opposition of the invaders. Ours is a most extraordinary and complicated case. Moreover, our part has always been a purely passive one, our political existence has always been dull, and we find ourselves in greater difficulties in attaining our liberty than we ever had, when we lived in a plane lower than servitude, because we had been robbed not only of liberty but also of active and domestic tyranny. Allow me to explain this paradox. In an absolute regime, authorized power does not admit any limits. The will of the despot is the supreme law, arbitrarily executed by the subordinates who participate in the organized oppression according to the measure of the authority they enjoy. They are entrusted with civil, political, military and religious functions, but in the last analysis, the satraps of Persia are Persians, the pashas of the great master are Turks, the sultans of Tartary are Tartars. China does not send for her mandarins to the land of Genghis Khan, her conqueror. America, in the contrary, received all from Spain, which had really deprived her of true enjoyment and exercise of active tyranny, by not permitting us to share in our own domestic affairs and interior administration. This deprivation had made it impossible for us to become acquainted with the course of public affairs, neither did we enjoy that personal consideration which the glamour of power inspires in the eyes of the multitude, so important in the great revolutions. I will say, in short, we were kept in estrangement, absent from the universe and all that relates to the science of government. The people of America, having been held under the triple yoke of ignorance, tyranny and vice, have not been in a position to acquire either knowledge, power or virtue. Disciples of such pernicious masters, the lessons we have received and the examples we have studied, are most destructive. We have been governed more by deception than by force, and we have been degraded more by vice than by superstition. Slavery is the offspring of darkness. An ignorant people is a blind tool, turned to its own destruction. Ambition and intrigue exploit the credulity and inexperience of men foreign to all political, economical or civil knowledge. Mere illusions are accepted as reality. License is taken for liberty, treachery for patriotism, revenge for justice. Even as a sturdy blind man who, relying on the feeling of his own strength, walks along with the assurance of the most wide-awake man and, striking against all kinds of obstacles, cannot steady his steps. A perverted people, should it attain its liberty, is bound to lose this very soon, because it would be useless to try to impress upon such people that happiness lies in the practice of righteousness, that the reign of law is more powerful than the iron of tyrants, who are more inflexible, and all ought to submit to the wholesome severity of the law, that good morals, and not force, are the pillars of the law, and that the exercise of justice is the exercise of liberty. Us, legislators, your task is the more laborious, because you are to deal with men misled by the illusions of error, and by civil incentives. Liberty, says Rousseau, is a succulent food, but difficult to digest. Our feeble fellow citizens will have to strengthen their mind much, before they will be ready to assimilate such wholesome nourishment. Their limbs made numb by their fetters, their eyesight weakened in the darkness of their dungeons and their forces wasted away through their foul servitude, will they be capable of embarking with a firm step towards the august temple of liberty? Will they be capable of coming close to it, and admiring the light it sheds, and of breathing freely its pure air? Consider well your decision. Legislators, do not forget that you are about to lay the foundations of a new people, which may someday rise to the heights that nature has marked out for it, provided you make those foundations proportionate to the lofty place which that people is to fill. If your selection be not made under the guidance of the guardian angel of Venezuela, who must inspire you with wisdom to choose the nature and form of government that you ask to adopt for the welfare of the people, if you should fail in this, I warn you, the end of our venture would be slavery. The annals of past ages display, before you thousands of governments, Recall to mind the nations which have shone most highly in the earth, and you will be grieved to see that almost the entire world has been, and still is, a victim of bad government. You will find many systems of governing men, but all are calculated to oppress them, and if the habit of seeing the human race, led by shepherds of peoples, did not dull the horror of such a revolting sight, we would be astonished to see our social species grazing on the surface of the globe, even as lowly herds destined to feed their cruel drivers. Nature, in truth, endows us at birth with the instinctive desire for liberty, but whether because of negligence, or because of an inclination inherent in humanity, it remains still under the bonds imposed in it. And as we see it in such a state of debasement, we seem to have reason to be persuaded that the majority of men hold as a truth the humiliating principle that it is harder to maintain the balance of liberty than to endure the weight of tyranny. Would to God that this principle, contrary to the morals of nature, were false. Would to God that this principle were not sanctioned by the indolence of man, as regards his most sacred rights. Many ancient and modern nations have cast off oppression, but those which have been able to enjoy a few precious moments of liberty are most rare, as they soon relapsed into their old political vices, because it is the people more often than the government that bring on tyranny. The habit of suffering domination makes them insensible to the charms of honor and national prosperity, and leads them to look with indolence upon the bliss of living in the midst of liberty, under the protection of laws framed by their own free will. The history of the world proclaims this awful truth. Only democracy, in my opinion, is susceptible of absolute freedom. But where is there a democratic government that has united at the same time power, prosperity and permanence? Have we not seen, in the contrary, aristocracy, monarchy rearing great and powerful empires for centuries and centuries? What government is there older than that of China? What republic has exceeded in duration that of Sparta, that of Venice? The Roman Empire, did it not conquer the world? Does not France count 14 centuries of monarchy? Who is greater than England? These nations, however, have been, or still are, aristocracies and monarchies. Notwithstanding such bitter reflections, I am filled with unbounded joy because of the great strides made by our republic, since entering upon its noble career. Loving that which is most useful, animated by what is most just and aspiring to what is most perfect, Venezuela in separating from the Spanish nation has recovered her independence, her freedom, her equality, her national sovereignty. In becoming a democratic republic, she proscribed monarchy, distinctions, nobility, franchises and privileges. She declared the rights of man, the liberty of action, of thought, of speech, of writing. These preeminently liberal acts will never be sufficiently admired for the sincerity by which they are inspired. The first Congress of Venezuela has impressed upon the annals of our legislation with indelible characters the majesty of the people, so fittingly expressed in the consummation of the social act best calculated to develop the happiness of a nation. I need to gather all my strength in order to feel with all the reverence of which I am capable, the supreme goodness embodied in this immortal code of our rights and our laws. But how can I venture to say it? Shall I dare profane by my censure the sacred tablets of our laws? There are sentiments that no lover of liberty can hold within his breast. They overflow stirred by their own violence, and notwithstanding the efforts of the one harboring such sentiments, an irresistible force will disclose them. I am convinced that the government of Venezuela must be changed, and while many illustrious citizens will feel, as I do, not all possess the necessary boldness to stand publicly for the adoption of new principles. This consideration compels me to take the initiative in a matter of the gravest concern, although there is great audacity in my pretending to give advice to the counselors of the people. The more I admire the excellence of the federal constitution of Venezuela, the more one I am persuaded of the impossibility of its application in our state. And, in my opinion, it is a wonder that its model in North America may endure so successfully, and is not upset in the presence of the first trouble or danger. Notwithstanding the fact that that people is a unique model of political virtues and moral education, notwithstanding that it has been cradled in liberty, that it has been reared in freedom and lives on pure liberty, I will say more, although in many respects that people is unique in the history of humanity, it is a prodigy, I repeat, that a system so weak and complicated, as the federal system should have served to govern that people in circumstances, as difficult and delicate, as those which have existed. But, whatever the case may be, as regards the American nation, I must say that nothing is further from my mind than to try to assimilate the conditions and character of two nations as different as the Anglo-American and the Spanish-American. Would it not be extremely difficult to apply to Spain the code of political, civil and religious liberty of England? It would be even more difficult to adapt to Venezuela the laws of North America. Does not the spirit of laws state that they must be suited to the people for whom they are made? That it is a great coincidence when the laws of one nation suit another, that laws must bear relation to the physical features of a country, its climate, its soil, its situation, extension and manner of living of the people, that they must have reference to the degree of liberty, that their constitution may be able to provide for the religion of the inhabitants, their inclinations, wealth, number, trade, customs and manners. Such is the code that we should consult, not that of Washington. The Venezuelan Constitution, notwithstanding the fact that the bases on which it rests have been taken from the most perfect constitution of its kind, and should we consider correctness of principles and the beneficent effect of its administration and differed essentially from the American Constitution in a cardinal point, and the most important without doubt. The Congress of Venezuela, like the American Congress, shares in some of the duties of the executive power. We, moreover, subdivide this power, having vested it in a collective body subject to the objection of making the life of the government a periodical one, suspending and dissolving it, whenever their members separate. Our triumvirate lacks, one may say, unity, continuity and individual responsibility, is deprived of action at a given moment, of continued life, of real uniformity, and immediate responsibility, and a government that does not possess everything that constitutes its moral force, must be called incapable. Although the faculties of the President of the United States are limited by excessive restrictions, he alone exercises by himself all the functions of government that the Constitution vests in him, and there is no doubting that his administration must be more uniform, constant and truly his own than that of a power divided among several persons, which can be but a hideous composite. The judiciary power of Venezuela is similar to the American, indefinite in its duration, temporary and not for life, and enjoying all the independence appertaining to it. The first Congress in its federal constitution took into consideration the spirit of the provinces rather than the solid idea of creating a republic indivisible and centralized. Our legislators in this instance yielded to the inconsiderate request of those provincials captivated by the dazzling appearance of the happiness of the American people, believing that the blessings they enjoy are solely due to the form of government and not to the character and habits of the citizens. In effect, the example given by the United States, because of their rare prosperity, was too enticing not to be followed. Who could resist the glorious attraction of the full and absolute enjoyment of sovereignty, independence, liberty? Who could resist the admiration inspired by an intelligent government which binds at the same time private and public rights, and forms by common consent the supreme law of individual choice? Who could resist the rule of a beneficent government that will enable, active and powerful and directs always and everywhere all its activities towards social perfection, which is the sole end of human institutions? But, no matter how flattering might appear and might be the effect of this splendid federal system, it was not feasible that Venezuelans could enjoy it of a sudden just after having cast off their fetters. We were not prepared for so much good. Good as well as evil produces death, when it is sudden and excessive. Our moral constitution had not attained yet the necessary consistency to reap the benefits of a government entirely representative and so exalted that it might be adopted to a republic of saintly men, representatives of the people. You have been called to confirm or suppress whatever you may deem worthy of being preserved, amended, or rejected in a social compact. To your lot falls the correction of the work of our first legislators. I would fain say that it behooves you to cover a portion of the beauties found in our political code, because not every heart is so made as to love all beauties, nor can all eyes stand the heavenly light of perfection. The Book of the Apostles, the doctrines of Jesus, the divine writings sent us by providence to better mankind, so sublime, so holy, is a rain of fire in Constantinople, and Asia entire would be a fierce conflagration should such a book of peace be suddenly imposed as a code of religion, law and customs. Permit me to call the attention of Congress to a matter which may be of vital importance. We must bear in mind that our population is not the people of Europe, not of North America, that it is rather a composite of Africa and America, which is an offspring of Europe. Spain herself ceases to be a European on account of her African blood, her institutions and her temperament. It is impossible to point out with preciseness to what human family we belong. The greater portion of the natives has been annihilated. The European has mixed with the Native American and the African, and this has mixed again with the Indian and the European. All having been born of the same mother, our parents, of different origin and blood, are foreigners, and all differ visibly in color of skin. This dissimilarity is a hindrance of the greatest importance. The citizens of Venezuela are all enjoyed by the Constitution, and the interpreter of what nature intended, and the perfect political equality. Even though this equality had not been a dogma in Athens, France and in America, we need to make it such, to correct the difference that apparently seems to exist. My opinion is, legislators, that the fundamental principle of our system depends immediately and exclusively in equality being established and exercised in Venezuela. That men are all born with equal rights to the benefits of society, has been sanctioned by the majority of the learned, but it has also been sanctioned that not all men are equally capable of attaining every distinction. While all should practice virtue, not all do practice it. All should be courageous and all are not courageous. All should possess talents and all do not possess them. Hence the real distinction existing among individuals of the most liberally established society. If the principle of political equality is generally acknowledged, that of physical or moral inequality is also recognized. Nature has made men unequal, as regards genius, temperament, strength and characteristics. The law is correct that difference by giving man a place in society, so that education, industry, service, virtue may give him a fictitious equality, properly called political and social equality. It is an eminently beneficent inspiration that of reuniting all classes in a state, where diversity multiples in proportion to the propagation of the species. By this single step, growing discord has been torn out by the roots. How much jealousy, rivalry and hatred has been thus avoided. Having done our duty towards justice, towards humanity, let us do it now to politics, to society, by smoothing over the difficulties presented by a system so simple and natural, but so weak that the slightest obstacle will upset and ruin it. The diversity of origin requires to be handled with infinite firmness, with infinite delicate tact in order to deal with an heterogeneous society whose complicated mechanism will become disjointed, divided, will dissolve at the slightest alteration. The most perfect system of government is that which produces the greatest sum of happiness possible, the greatest sum of social security and political stability. Through the laws enacted by the first Congress we have the right to expect that happiness be the lot of Venezuela, and through your laws we must hope that security and stability will perpetuate such happiness. It is for you to solve the problem. But how, after having broken all the chains of our former oppression, could we accomplish the marvelous task of preventing the remnants of our fetters from being turned into liberticidal weapons? The relics of Spanish domination will last a long time, before we succeed in annihilating them. Contagion of despotism has vitiated our atmosphere, and neither the fire of war nor yet the remedy of our wholesome laws has succeeded in purifying the air we breathe. Our hands are now free, while our hearts still suffer the ills of servitude. Man in losing his liberty, Homer has said, loses one half of his manhood. A republican government has been, is and must be that of Venezuela, based on the sovereignty of the people, the division of power, civil liberty, proscription of slavery, abolition of monarchy and privileges. We need equality to recast, so to speak, in a single mass the classes of men, political beliefs and public customs. Now, casting our eye over the vast field to be surveyed, let us fix our attention in the dangers to be avoided. Let history be our guide in this undertaking. Athens is the first to give us the most brilliant example of an absolute democracy, and at the same time Athens will offer the most melancholy example of the extreme weakness of such a system of government. The wisest among the legislators of Greece did not see his republic last 10 years, and suffered the humiliation of having to acknowledge the inadequacy of absolute democracy to govern any form of society, even the most cultured, moderate and restrained, because it only shines with flashes of liberty. We must acknowledge, therefore, that Solon has undeceived the world and shown how difficult it is to govern men with mere laws. The Republic of Sparta, which appeared to be a chimerical invention, did produce more real results than the skillful work of Solon. Glory, virtues, morals, and therefore national happiness, were the result of Lycurgus legislation. Although two kings to one state are two devouring monsters, Sparta had very little to complain of its double throne, while Athens confidently expected the most splendid future with an absolute sovereignty, free election of officials, frequently changed, and laws that were gentle, wise and politic. Pisistratus, a usurper and a tyrant, did more good to Athens than her laws, and Pericles, although a usurper also, was the most useful citizen. The Republic of Thebes did not live longer than Peloponnese and Epaminondas, because at times many and not principles constitute a government. No matter how great the wisdom contained in codes, systems and statutes, they are a dead letter having but little influence in society. Virtuous men, patriotic men, learned men make the Republic. The Roman Constitution has given the greatest power and fortune to any one people in the world. It did not provide for an exact division of powers. The consuls, the senate, the people now were legislators, now executive officials, now judges, all participated in all the functions. The executive, consisting of two consuls, had the same difficulty as that of Sparta. Notwithstanding this shortcoming, the Republic did not suffer the disastrous results, which all provision might have thought unavoidable, of an executive consisting of two officials having the same authority with the powers of a monarch. A government, the only inclination of which was conquest, did not seem destined to cement the happiness of the nation. A monstrous government, purely warlike, raised Rome to the highest state of virtue and glory and made of the earth a Roman domain, as if to show man how far political virtue may lead, and how unimportant institutions may be. And passing now from ancient to modern times, we find England and France attracting attention of all nations, and teaching them eloquent lessons of all sorts in the matter of government. The revolution of these two great peoples, like a brilliant meteor, has flooded the world with such a profusion of political light that now all thinking men have learned what are the rights of men, what are their duties, what constitutes the excellency of a government and what its vices. All know how to appreciate the intrinsic value of the speculative theories of modern philosophers and lawmakers. In fine, that star, in its luminous career, has even inflamed the heart of the apathetic Spaniards, who have also entered the political whirlwind, have made ephemeral attempts at liberty, have acknowledged their incapacity to live under the gentle rule of law, and have gone back to their immemorial dungeons and the stake. This is the proper time, legislators, to repeat what the eloquent Volley says in the dedication of his Ruins of Palmyra, to the rising peoples of the Spanish Indies, to the generous men who lead them to liberty. May the errors and misfortunes of the old world teach wisdom and happiness to the new world. Let us not lose, then, the benefit of the lessons drawn from experience, and may the schools of Greece, Rome, France, England, and America instruct us in the difficult science of creating and maintaining the nations under proper laws, just, legitimate and, above all, useful. We must never forget that the superiority of a government does not consist in its theories, or in its form, or in its mechanism, but in its being appropriate to the nature and character of the nation for which it has been instituted. Rome and Great Britain are the two nations which have excelled most among ancient and modern peoples. Both were born to rule and to be free, but both were constituted not with dazzling forms of liberty, but built on solid foundations. Hence, I recommend you, representatives, to study the British Constitution, which is the one that seems destined to do the most possible good to the peoples that adopt it. But no matter how perfect it may be, I am very far from suggesting a servile imitation. When I speak of the British government, I only refer to whatever it has of the republican system, and truly, could we call a monarchy a system that recognizes popular sovereignty, the division and balance of power, civil liberty and the liberty of conscience, the freedom of the press and everything which is sublime in politics? Could there be any more liberty in any republic whatsoever? And could any more be said of social order? I recommend such constitution, as the most worthy of being taken as a model by all who yearn for the enjoyment of the rights of men, and all political happiness compatible with our frail nature. Our fundamental laws would not be altered in the least should we adopt a legislative power similar to the British Parliament. We have divided, as Americans did, national representation into two chambers, the representatives and the Senate. The first is very wisely constituted, enjoys all the functions appertaining to it, and is not susceptible of a radical reform, because it is the Constitution which gave it origin, form and such faculties, as the will of the people deemed necessary to be legally and properly represented. If the Senate, instead of being elective were hereditary, it would be, in my opinion, the foundation, the binding tie, the very soul of our republic. This body would arrest the lightning of government in our political storms, and would break the popular waves. Attached to the government, because of its natural interest of self-preservation, it will always oppose the invasions attempted by the people against the jurisdiction and the authority of its rulers. We must confess it, the generality of men fail to recognize what their real interests are and constantly endeavor to assail them in the hands of their trustees, and the individual struggles against the masses, and the masses against the authorities. It is necessary, therefore, that a neutral body should exist in every government, always siding with the aggrieved party to disarm the offender. This neutral body, to be such, must not owe its origin to the election of the government, nor to the election of the people, so as to enjoy a full measure of freedom, neither fearing nor expecting anything from either of these two sources of authority. The hereditary Senate, as a part of the people, shares in its interests, in its sentiments, in its spirit. For this reason it is not to be presumed that a hereditary Senate would disregard the popular interests or forget its legislative duties. The Roman senators and the lords of London have been the staunchest columns on which the structure of political and civil liberty has been erected. These senators would be elected by Congress the first time. The succession to the Senate should engage the first attention of the government, which would educate them in a college specially devoted to instructing these tutors, future legislators of the country. They should learn the arts, sciences and letters, the accomplishments of the mind of public men. From childhood they should know the career to which Providence has destined them, and from a tender age they should temper their soul to the dignity awaiting them. The creation of a hereditary Senate would be in no wise a violation of political equality. 1. Do not pretend to establish a nobility, because, as a famous Republican has said, it would be to destroy at the same time equality and liberty. It is a calling, for which candidates must be prepared. It is an office requiring much knowledge and the proper means to become learned in it. Everything must not be left to chance and fortune. In the elections, the people are more easily deceived than nature perfected by art, and although it is true that these senators would not spring from the womb of perfection, it is also true that they would spring from the womb of a learned education. In the other hand, the liberators of Venezuela are entitled to hold, always, a high rank in the republic which owes its existence to them. I believe that posterity would grieve to see the effacement of the illustrious names of their first benefactors. I say, moreover, that it is a matter of public interest, all the gratitude of Venezuela, of national honor, to preserve with glory to the end of posterity a race of men of virtues, prudence and valor, who mastering all obstacles have founded the republic at the cost of the most heroic sacrifices.